You rise early. You push yourself harder. You pray longer. You serve with all your strength. And yet, deep inside, you feel empty. You wonder, God, am I doing enough? You pour yourself out like oil on an altar built by your own hands. But maybe the real question isn't, am I doing enough for God? Maybe the question is, am I letting God do enough through me? The uncomfortable truth is this. You can be endlessly busy for God and still miss Him entirely. You can be exhausted from serving and yet be spiritually barren. You can work tirelessly in ministries, build programs, attend countless meetings, and discover one day that God was never asking for your effort. He was asking for your surrender. This is not a message of condemnation. It is a message of freedom. Because real power in the Christian life is never about how much you do for God. It is always about how much you allow God to do through you. Jesus said in John 15:5, I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit, for apart from me, you can do nothing. Notice that, apart from him, we can do nothing. Not a little, not something smaller, nothing. All human effort, no matter how sincere, becomes nothing unless it flows from abiding in him. It is not your energy that produces eternal fruit. It is his life flowing through you. Yet many live as if Jesus said, without me, you can do less. So we try harder. We strategize. We organize. We move faster and work longer, believing we are serving God, while ignoring the reality that we have disconnected from the source of life itself. It is frightening how easily spiritual activism can disguise itself as true devotion. We can build ministries, launch projects, write sermons, organize events, and yet be moving entirely in our own strength. There is a terrifying reality hidden here. We can work for God without walking with God. We can serve without surrendering. We can move in His name without living by His Spirit. On the outside, everything can look holy. To human eyes, it can seem impressive. But in heaven, it weighs nothing. Because heaven does not measure the motion of our hands. It measures the posture of our hearts. Paul reminds us in 1 Corinthians 3:13 that each one's work will become manifest, for the day will disclose it, because it will be revealed by fire. Only what is born of God will endure. The question is not how much you're doing. The question is whether what you are doing is born of your abiding in Christ. Is it the fruit of the Spirit's life within you? Or is it the fruit of ambition, even ambition dressed in religious language? Spiritual ambition is subtle. You can desire to do great things for God, and yet, without realizing it, seek greatness for yourself. If God called you to walk in obscurity for the rest of your life, would you still be faithful? If the only reward you ever received was the smile of heaven and not the applause of man, would that be enough for you? These are not easy questions, but they are necessary ones. Because what pleases God is not the scale of your ministry or the size of your influence. It is the surrender of your will to His. When Jesus knelt to wash His disciples' feet, He wasn't performing a religious act. He was revealing the heart of true ministry, not striving for position, not seeking recognition, but pouring Himself out in humble love. Philippians 2:13 says, For it is God who works in you, both to will and to work for His good pleasure. It is God who works in you, not you trying to work for Him. This changes everything. You're not called to build something great for God. You're called to become so surrendered that God builds something great through you. The branch does not bear fruit by struggling. It bears fruit by remaining attached to the vine. If today you feel burned out, tired, running on empty, maybe God is not asking you to do more. Maybe He's asking you to abide deeper. The call of Christ is not a call to endless work. It is a call to deeper surrender. It is not your strength He desires. It is your heart. Not your plans, but your presence. Not your projects, but your posture. Because the life that flows from abiding will bear fruit in its season. Fruit that remains when all human striving has faded away. But what does it really look like to let God work through you, not just in theory, but in the real pressures of daily life? In the next part, We will uncover the hidden difference between activity for God and life from God. It is one thing to talk about letting God work through you. It is another thing to live it when the weight of expectations presses down on your shoulders. It is easy to say, "I surrender," when the sun is shining and the path is clear. It is much harder when the deadlines loom, when the needs around you scream for action, when the pressure to produce and perform gnaws at your spirit. In those moments, we are tempted to default to our own strength. We know the words, trust, abide, wait, but something inside us still believes the lie that if we just work harder, we can make it happen. This is the hidden difference between working for God and letting God work through you. Working for God feels urgent, pressured, rushed. Letting God work through you feels surrendered, peaceful, trusting. When you're working for God, you carry the burden of success on your own back. Every result depends on you. Every failure feels like a personal collapse. But when you let God work through you, you realize the outcome was never yours to control. You obey, you follow, you trust, and you leave the results in His hands. Jesus never moved in panic. He never ran after opportunities. He never tried to force open doors that were closed. Even when crowds demanded His attention, He remained centered in His Father's will. In Mark 1:35-38, we see Jesus withdrawing early in the morning to pray, even when the entire town was searching for Him. His priority was not the demands of people. It was communion with the Father. And from that place of abiding, He moved with divine authority and clarity. When we lose our connection to the vine, we start operating by pressure instead of presence. We start measuring success by numbers, applause, and outcomes instead of obedience, faithfulness, and intimacy with God. But true ministry, true life in the kingdom, is not about managing appearances. It is about walking in step with the Spirit. Galatians 5:25 reminds us, if we live by the Spirit, let us also keep in step with the Spirit. Notice the language. Keep in step, not run ahead, not lag behind. Step by step, moment by moment, moving at His pace, not ours. This is the rhythm of grace. It is slower than the world demands, but far more powerful. It builds something eternal rather than something impressive. When you let God work through you, you will sometimes look foolish to others. You will not always have a 5-year plan. You will not always have the loudest voice in the room. You may be misunderstood. You may be overlooked, but you will have something the world cannot manufacture: the quiet, steady fire of the Holy Spirit burning within you. There is an immense difference between action that is birthed from anxiety and action that is birthed from abiding. Anxiety-driven action says, if I don't move, everything will fall apart. Abiding-driven action says, I move because God is moving, and I am simply following His lead. One produces burnout and pride. The other produces peace and fruit that remains. Isaiah 30:15 says, in returning and rest you shall be saved. In quietness and trust shall be your strength. But the verse continues with tragic words, but you were unwilling. That is the heart of the struggle. Not that God is unwilling to move through us. We are often unwilling to rest, unwilling to trust, unwilling to slow down enough to hear His whisper. God is not looking for your performance. He is looking for your posture. He is not impressed by your busyness. He is drawn to your brokenness. Psalm 51:17 says, the sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and contrite heart. O God, you will not despise. A broken spirit does not mean self-hatred. It means a spirit emptied of self-reliance, humbled and dependent, ready to be filled with the life of Christ. When you stop striving and start surrendering, something extraordinary happens. You discover that God is far more capable of accomplishing His will through you than you ever were by yourself. His timing is better. His strategies are wiser. His fruit is eternal. And you realize that what He can do through a yielded heart far exceeds what you could ever build with a lifetime of your own efforts. Maybe today you feel like you are carrying the weight of the world on your back. Maybe you've been trying so hard to serve God, but deep inside, you are weary, frustrated, wondering why the results seem so fragile. Perhaps God is inviting you to lay down the burden you were never meant to carry. Perhaps He is whispering, "Let me work through you. Trust me. Rest in me." The question is not how much you're doing for God. The question is whether you're willing to be still long enough for Him to move through you. But how do we truly surrender control without falling into passivity? How do we live in daily dependence without becoming paralyzed by fear? In the next part, we will explore what real, active surrender looks like, not just in theory, but in the raw reality of everyday life. Real surrender is not the absence of action. It is the presence of yielded action. It is not sitting still, waiting passively for signs to fall from the sky. It is moving as a response to the Spirit's leading rather than moving out of human urgency. Active surrender looks like waking up every morning and saying, "Father, not my will, but yours be done today." It looks like holding your plans loosely, offering them up to be reshaped, delayed, or discarded as God sees fit. It looks like obeying small whispers rather than chasing grand opportunities. When Jesus lived on earth, He modeled a life of active surrender. In John 5:19, He declared, "Truly, truly, I say to you, the Son can do nothing of His own accord, but only what He sees the Father doing." Imagine the humility of that statement. Jesus, the very Son of God, refused to act independently of the Father. He did not heal, preach, travel, or confront without first seeing and hearing from the one who sent Him. And if Jesus lived in such radical dependence, how much more must we? Active surrender is a heart posture before it is a life pattern. It is the willingness to lay down even good things if God says not now. It is the courage to walk into unknown places simply because He said go. It is the trust to remain hidden when the world tempts you to seek visibility. It is the resilience to continue obeying when no one applauds and no results seem immediate. We often equate movement with effectiveness, but in God's kingdom, obedience is effectiveness. Faithfulness is success. There are times when surrender means stepping forward boldly into battle, and there are times when surrender means waiting silently while God fights for you. Exodus 14:14 promises, "The Lord will fight for you, and you have only to be silent." Surrender is dynamic, not static. It listens carefully. It responds swiftly. It does not make demands. It does not rush to manipulate outcomes. It trusts that the God who called is the same God who will complete the work. But surrender is costly. It costs the pride that says, "I know best." It costs the impatience that demands results on a human timeline. It costs the fear that clutches tightly to control. When we surrender, we lay down the illusion that we can manufacture God's promises through human effort. We acknowledge that only He can bring about His purposes in His perfect way. Abraham had to surrender Isaac on the altar before he ever received the fullness of God's covenant. Moses had to surrender his identity as a prince of Egypt before he could lead Israel out of bondage. Paul had to surrender his reputation, his safety, even his very life to fulfill his calling. The road of surrender is the road every true servant of God must walk. There will be moments when surrender feels like death. Death to dreams, to ambitions, to carefully constructed plans. But in God's economy, death always precedes resurrection. What you lay down in obedience will be raised up in glory, refined, purified, made infinitely more beautiful than anything you could have built by yourself. Galatians 2:20 captures this truth. "I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me." That is the essence of the surrendered life. Not less life, but exchanged life. Not a weaker version of yourself, but Christ Himself living through you. When you surrender fully, you will find a new kind of strength rising within you. Not the strength of self-determination, but the strength of divine empowerment. Isaiah 40:31 promises, "But they who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint." Waiting on God is not inactivity. It is the most powerful kind of activity, the kind that prepares you to move at the speed of His Spirit, not the speed of human demand. Perhaps today you are standing at the crossroads between striving and surrender. You can continue pushing forward, exhausting yourself in the pursuit of results, or you can lay down your striving and trust the hand of the one who called you. It will not always feel easy. It will often feel like you're swimming against the current of culture, even against the current of religious expectation. But it will always be worth it, because the surrendered life is not just a better life. It is the only life that truly bears fruit that remains. It is the only life that echoes into eternity. But what happens when surrender leads you into seasons of hiddenness, obscurity, and seeming insignificance? How do you remain faithful when no one sees, no one applauds, and no visible fruit appears? In the next part, we will explore the silent seasons, the hidden years where God does His deepest work. The hidden years are where true surrender is tested. It is easy to surrender when the crowds are watching, when the results are visible, when every step seems to be leading you closer to your dream. But when the path grows quiet, when the applause fades, when it feels like God has tucked you away in obscurity, that is where the true heart of surrender is revealed. Hiddenness is not punishment. It is preparation. It is in the unseen places that God does His deepest work within us. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness tending sheep before he ever stood before Pharaoh. David tended flocks in secret fields long before he wore a crown. Even Jesus Himself spent 30 hidden years before stepping into public ministry. In every case, it was the hidden season that shaped the vessel for the visible calling. And yet, when we find ourselves in a hidden season, we are so quick to resist, to doubt, to question whether God has forgotten us. But God never wastes hiddenness. It is in those unseen places that our roots grow deep. It is where we learn to hear His whisper without the noise of the crowd. It is where we learn to obey when no one is watching. It is where pride dies and pure devotion is born. If you find yourself in a season where it feels like nothing is moving, where doors seem closed, where your faithfulness feels unseen, take heart. You are in the hands of a master craftsman. He is shaping you for purposes you cannot yet imagine. Hebrews 11:1 reminds us, "Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen." Faith is forged not in the fireworks of public success, but in the quiet persistence of unseen obedience. Every act of surrender you offer in the hidden place is seen by the eyes of heaven. Every prayer whispered in the night, every tear shed in secret, every small act of obedience matters more than you know. God is not preparing you for stage. He is preparing you for Himself. He is more interested in who you are becoming than in what you are producing. And often, the very season you are tempted to resent is the season He is using to lay the foundation for the fruit you will bear. Hidden seasons strip away false identities. They confront our need for validation. They reveal whether we are serving for applause or for the pleasure of God alone. And they remind us that at the core of everything, true ministry is not about doing for God. It is about being with Him. When the hidden season is over and God moves you into the place He has prepared for you, you will be ready. Not because you built a great resume, but because you built a history with Him. You will not move in human confidence. You will move in holy dependence. The branch that bears much fruit is the one that remained faithfully attached to the vine during every season. In the winter when nothing seemed to grow, in the storms when branches broke all around, in the droughts when life felt dry and empty. Faithfulness is not glamorous. It is often unnoticed, uncelebrated, unthanked, but is precious to God. In Revelation 2:10, Jesus says, "Be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life." Faithfulness is the measure of greatness in the kingdom of God. Not visibility, not success, not applause. Just quiet, steady surrender to the one who is worthy of it all. Maybe today you feel hidden, overlooked, forgotten. Maybe you have been faithfully sowing seeds without seeing fruit. Maybe you're tempted to believe that your surrender is meaningless. But hear this, God sees. God knows. God honors the heart that remains faithful even when no one else notices. Keep building history with Him in the secret place. Keep saying yes when no one claps. Keep trusting when the road ahead is unclear. Because in due time, He will lift you up. In due time, the seed sown in tears will reap a harvest of joy. The life that allows God to work through it is a life that trusts even in the silence, even in the hiddenness, even in the waiting. It is the life that declares, I do not live for results. I live for relationship. I do not live for recognition. I live for His glory. I do not live for what my hands can build. I live for what His Spirit can birth through my surrender. Surrender is not a moment. It is a lifestyle. It is waking up every day and laying your life again on the altar, whispering, not my will, but yours be done. It is trusting that the one who began a good work in you will be faithful to complete it, not by your strength, but by His power, His timing, His grace. So today, if you hear His voice, do not harden your heart. Yield, trust, surrender again. Because the life surrendered into the hands of God becomes a canvas where He paints His greatest masterpieces. And if this message spoke to your heart today, I invite you to not keep it to yourself. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that hiddenness is not abandonment, but preparation. Leave a comment below saying, I choose to surrender daily, as a declaration of faith. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to our channel, because here we are building a community of hearts fully yielded to Christ, one surrendered life at a time. Keep abiding, keep trusting. He is working even when you cannot see it.